Hi everybody, this is Tanya Friedman, the Chief Operating Officer of Kinetics, and sitting next to me is Carl Schusterman,
Hello.
Probably the top immigration lawyer in the US. We're very honored to have you again to do another Facebook Live session and ask you some questions.
Sounds good.
On this very hot California sunny day, we seem to be having a bit of a heat wave. On Friday the 13th.
True.
But at least we're sitting in the air conditioning.
Okay.
So let's get started. So today we are going to be covering in more detail the actual more in-depth process of the Consulate Green Card. We're going to be going through each of the stages, and Carl's going to be sharing his expert advice, information, and tips on how the process works, because it can be very confusing, and for a lot of nurses outside the country can be very overwhelming. So before we get to that, just another introduction. I know we've done the introduction on our previous Facebook Live sessions, but I think there might be some new people who are we live? Okay. We're live. Okay, sorry for a minute. I was having a Friday afternoon senior moment. Okay, we're live. So we are going to be going through the process, but I wanted to just do a brief introduction. So first of all, just in terms of myself from Kinetics, I have been in recruitment for more than 30 years. I have been doing nurse recruitment for many, many years, and we focus specifically on international recruitment. And also we have, I see we have our first person watching, Naz from Saudi Arabia. Welcome. And we have Don coming online. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. Again, I was introducing myself. I'm Tanya. I've been in recruitment for many, many years. We've been doing nurse recruitment for many years. Kinetics are a recruitment company. We are not a staffing company. And there's a lot of confusion about that in the market. But basically what it means, hi from Canada, Don. Basically what that means is we are career matchmakers. So we recruit nurses, registered nurses from all over the US, for all over the US. And hi, Lucky, watching from Kuwait. We recruit from countries all over the world. So the UK, Canada, Philippines, India, South Africa, where I'm from. I was originally an immigrant myself many, many years ago. I'm of course American now, but proud American. But I have been, I know personally how hard this process is to come to the US, and it's really a passion of mine to share information and make sure that all our nurses are informed about the process and can get as much expertise from people like Carl as possible, because as I said, it can be very confusing and overwhelming. So that's a little bit about me. Here's a little bit about Carl.
Keep it little. Keep it little.
So there's a lot to say about Carl. He has, and I'm going to read this because it's a lot of information. So he has over 40 years of experience practicing immigration law. He served as a trial attorney for U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS, from 1976 to 1982, when he entered the private practice. He's one of the very limited number of attorneys who've been designated as certified specialists in immigration and naturalized law by the California State Bar. For more than 10 years, this is important and impressive,
okay.
He's been voted as one of the best lawyers in America. So we're very excited to have you to speak to. He is a super lawyer, voted a super lawyer by his colleagues at the bar. He was featured in February 2018 issue of Super Lawyers magazine. He's been named one of the top 15 corporate immigration lawyers in the US. Wow. His hard work and dedication to immigration have earned him the highest rating in legal ability and ethics from the prestigious Martindale-Hubbell Legal Directly. He is known in the Who's Who of Corporate American Lawyers, the Chamber US Guide for Leading Business Lawyers. He's an expert. Right. So let's get to it, Carl.
Okay.
So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Consulate Green Card process. And hi to all the nurses who have just joined us. This Facebook Live session, if you've just joined us, is for registered nurses. And the reason is registered nurses are the only kinds of nurses that, besides nurse practitioners, obviously, that can get a green card, correct?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay. Oh, okay.
So all sorts of nurses can get green cards, but the route for registered nurses is faster and easier than for any other nurses.
Okay. So can you talk to us a little bit about like the Schedule A? And
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Schedule A is something the U.S. Labor Department has. Usually when you want to get a green card through your job, the employer has to advertise the job, has to show that they can't find American workers for the job. But in two categories, the Labor Department has said there is such a shortage of Americans for these jobs, you can skip all the advertising, because if you have a foreign-born person in one of these two occupations who wants to come to the U.S., we're not going to make you waste money on advertising when we know there's a shortage. So one is physical therapists and the other is registered nurses.
Okay, so that's where the registered nurses comes in.
Right. So if you were an LVN or something
Correct.
like that, it doesn't mean you can't immigrate, but it means the employer would have to advertise the job.
So they would have to go another route.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I meant to say is that only registered nurses would qualify for this particular route because they are Schedule A.
That is right.
Okay,
Yeah.
correct. Okay, so just to clarify.
Okay,
we're on
we
the
got
same
it.
page. Okay. So I see we have Milanis watching. We have some new people joining us, so welcome everybody. I know that I've done this before, but I think it's worthwhile just to reiterate for those new viewers who are watching, is just to quote some stats from the American Nurse Association. It is found that the country will need to produce more than 1 million new registered nurses by 2022 to fulfill its healthcare needs. So I think, it's important that we just kind of mention that because right now there's a lot of talk about immigration in the US, but I think nurses really just fall into a different category because they really, they are, as you say, Schedule A, and they are of short supply, and that we know, according to the statistics, with an aging population, not enough nurses being trained in the US, there's just going to be a shortage that's continually growing.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been immigrating nurses for over 40 years now, and I've testified before Congress on this, on the need to have more nursing schools, more instructors for American nurses. But even despite that, you are right. They're predicting over 1 million shortages of nurses, and that'll be very, very bad for the American public if we let that happen.
Yeah. Okay. So, and from our side, so we are what we call career matchmakers, which means that we work with a lot of different hospitals all over the US, and they are experiencing varying degrees of the shortage. They know that it's going to get worse. So at no time are they not recruiting American nurses. I mean, obviously that's their first objective. But many nurses are looking at international nurses, whether they come from Canada or from other countries, because the process is a little different. But as a kind of like another strategy to augment or supplement their regular American recruitment of nurses, like kind of another tool in their toolbox.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's start let's start talking about the process of a consulate green card. So you want to just explain to us what is a consulate green card? Let's start at the beginning.
Okay. So a lot of the nurses are living abroad. They're not in the United States when they apply for a green card. And the reason is because for the first 20 years that I practiced law, there was a temporary visa that nurses could get. But now, unless you're an advanced practice nurse, like a nurse practitioner or a certified registered nurse anesthetist, or possibly some nurse managers, it's difficult, if not impossible, for a nurse to get a temporary visa. There, of course, with everything in immigration law, there's always exceptions. So there are TN visas for Canadian and Mexican nurses. But nurses from other countries, it's almost impossible to get a temporary visa. So consular processing is when the nurse is getting her green card abroad. And the nurse can be living abroad or can be living in the United States, but they choose to go to the embassy or one of the U.S. consulates in their country to be interviewed for the green card.
Okay. So, and just to tell everybody, we are going to be doing another session soon on the TN visa, where we're going to be talking about that in a bit more detail. So for today's purposes, we're really just focusing more on the consulate green card process.
Right.
I saw a question there about why are agencies stopping to file at present, that there's some kind of a decline. So that is something that we will talk about a little bit later in this Facebook Live session. Okay, so my understanding, the first step of the process for the consulate green card is the prevailing wage.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So do you want to tell us a little bit more about the prevailing wage?
Right.
What is involved? What is the timelines? How does it work?
Well, I'm going to keep it really simple, but you know, the obvious thing is when people are going to immigrate through job offers in the United States because we don't have enough nurses or enough engineers or whatever, you know, cancer researchers, whatever the job is. The immigration laws in the United States are rightly very strict about it. They don't want the employers to hire people from abroad that they can undercut American wages.
Of course. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. So we have to go to the government, and it takes about 3 months, unfortunately, but we go to the government and say, this nurse will be an ICU nurse in Los Angeles or Cleveland or Miami or wherever it is. Okay. And then the Labor Department will tell us the prevailing wage is, let's say, $65,000 for a nurse in that category.
Okay.
And the requirement is that the employer must pay the nurse at the prevailing wage or the actual wage, whichever is higher. So if that employer is, you know, in Beverly Hills or, you know, some fancy place, and the prevailing wage is $65,000, but they're paying their American nurses $75,000, then the wage they'll have to pay the foreign nurse will be $75,000, not $65,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's basically a measure to make sure that nobody is exploiting any international workers.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that they're not undercutting American nurses' salaries.
Yeah. So both sides of the coin, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So in terms of so how does it work? So we get this question from nurses all the time because they say, well, I spoke to a nurse this morning. She just got placed at one of our clients, and she was like, okay, I'm ready to file.
Okay.
I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. There's a number of stages and milestones that it goes through. So the first is the prevailing wage.
Right.
So how long specifically does it take for the prevailing wage?
It used to be a lot faster, but now it's about 3 months to get a prevailing wage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from a nurse's perspective, when the hospital files the prevailing wage, basically what happens is they just wait. There's nothing from the nurse's side that they need to do at that stage.
Right. There's nothing for the nurse to do except maybe, you know, I advise the employers to, you know, it takes us some time to get started on putting the papers together to file the initial petition for the employer. So we can do that during the 3 months. And then these other requirements that the nurse has, visa screen and licensing and all that, that gives them 3 extra months to make sure they're all taken care of.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So basically from the nurse's perspective, they should start collating any documents that needs to be obtained or, you know, collected while they're in that wait period.
Right.
So that when it comes to the time of filing, they're ready.
Right. I mean, I can't tell you how many nurses I've seen, you know, even though there's probably 15 million, not quite, 15,000 immigration attorneys in the country, there's only a small minority of us that have been doing lots of nurses for years. And nurses, like I said, since they're a Schedule A category, a lot of immigration lawyers have never done a Schedule A case. They're used to doing the perm where you advertise the job. So actually this 3 months gives us a chance to work with the nurses and the employers and make sure that we're not just wasting the 3 months, that the nurse on her part is getting all the requirements she needs to immigrate, and that the employer is doing their part so that when we file the next part of this application, those 3 months haven't been wasted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's very much a step-by-step process.
Absolutely.
And each person needs to know their role and what is required at each step of the way.
Exactly.
So the next step, from what I understand, is the posting.
Yes.
So tell us a little more about the posting.
So there's a 10-day posting requirements. And again, you have to say that you're sponsoring the nurse for a green card. You have to show what the wage is. You have to show that you haven't had layoffs of nurses. All these different requirements. And some people get mixed up with this because it says 10 business days. Well, hospitals are open 7 days a week, but a business day in the mind of the government is Monday through Friday. So posting it on Saturday and Sunday is not going to add any extra days. And if the hospital or the healthcare provider is unionized, then there's not a 10-day posting requirement, but the union representative must be served with that same notice, and then they must write a letter that's notarized at the end of this to show that they were served with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's a union or a non-union hospital, it's a different process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens? So say, I've had this many times, especially for clients who have not done green cards before, where they do it, they'll do the posting, but they don't realize, as you say, it's a common mistake that it's it's 10 business days.
Right.
So so that's important to mention. But once that has come back and that has been done correctly and it's accurate to the 10 days, what happens next?
Well, even during the 10 days, we'll go and we'll file. It's called a Form I-140. Are you talking about something before that?
Yes, just about the cooling period, the 30 days.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to skip that. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, immigration's a complicated path, Okay. So after the posting requirement, there is a 30-day, they call it cooling off period. It's supposed to be something that would give American nurses the ability to apply for these jobs, and then the employer would say, I don't need another nurse. Although there's such a shortage, I can tell you that in the maybe 10,000 plus nurses that we've immigrated over the years, we've never had that happen where they say, we don't need a nurse anymore. Because usually if the employer's applying for a foreign nurse, they probably have 10, 20, 30 openings. So if they get an American that will take one of those jobs, they're thrilled about it, but they're still going to need the foreign nurse as well.
Okay, all right. So once the cooling period is done, right, then we can move, and this is where a lot of people have heard these terms before. We move to the stage which is the I-140.
Right. So
can you...
Yeah, should I move over a little? I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't want to be too rude here, but I'll move over.
That's okay. We just want to make sure everyone can see you and hear you. You're the expert.
So all the immigration forms that deal with immigration rather than naturalization start with the letter I for immigration.
Okay,
we have links to all those forms, hundreds of them, on our website. And this one's called an I-140. It's any employer, whether they're going through the PERM or whether they're doing Schedule A, they have to file this I-140 with the Immigration Service and show that they've gone through the posting requirements, that they're paying the prevailing wage, and also that the nurse, they have to describe the job and show that the nurse does meet the minimum requirements for the job, whatever the college degree is, whatever the level of experience is, and they file it with the Immigration Service.
Okay.
Okay.
So from a nurse's perspective, there's basically going to be a list of documents that they're going to get from the lawyer that says, okay, I need your birth certificate, your transcripts, your education. There's basically like a list of documents that they're going to get that they need to then collate and send back to the lawyer.
Right.
And then on the client side, they will have a list of documents that need to be collated from the client side, from the hospital side, from the hospital side, and then sent back to the lawyers to put into one kind of package.
Right.
To be submitted.
Right. And you know, when you do it frequently, you really have those, you know, a lot of immigration cases that we take at our firm are very individual, depends on, but a nurse case is pretty standard. Once you've got it down, we have a list of things for the nurses, a list of things for the employer, and pretty much on day one when they retain us for our work, we send them out. So while we're going through the posting,
the premium processing,
the prevailing wage, all that.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, not the premium processing.
Yeah, the prevailing wage.
Sorry.
We don't want to waste any time because you know we know the employer needs that nurse as soon as possible, and the nurse would like to get over here as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can see that even though it does take a while and there are a number of steps, it's a very methodical process.
Yes.
And if you're working with a lawyer that is very experienced and really understands nurse recruitment, they can preempt a lot of the steps that you can try and get prepared for it before you get to that stage.
It just saves a lot of time, a lot of headaches.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the one thing that I wanted to speak about, and that's where I was mixed up prevailing wage and premium processing, is the premium processing.
Okay.
So
immigration, especially now, and during this administration, the lines have gotten longer. Things take more time to process. So one of the things you can do for this I-140, if you file it just the regular way, it may take 7 or 8 months for the Immigration Service to approve it. If the employer pays another $1,225, they can ask for premium processing. And premium processing means the government must turn around. They must give you some kind of answer within 15 days.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people get confused and think, well, that means an approval in 15 days. And if you do it the right way, usually it is an approval. But I just want to warn people that it doesn't necessarily mean an approval. A lot of the people that work for my old employer, the Immigration Service, if they don't get back to you within 15 days, that means that they have to give that $1,225 back, and they're underfunded. They don't want to do that. So sometimes they'll give you something called an RFE, you know, which is a request for evidence, and it's like, oh, well, you left out this, or you left out
some additional information they require.
And sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes it's something we've already submitted. Other times, the examiners at immigration who are not attorneys, sometimes there's mistakes that they make. But if you should be ready to respond to that RFE as quickly as possible, and then they have another 15 days to make a decision.
Okay. So before we get to the RFEs, let's just go back a moment to the I-140.
Yes.
So my understanding is that you will get an I-140 receipt notice.
That is
because
right.
I think sometimes people also get confused with a receipt notice and an approval notice.
Yes.
So I have a lot of nurses that we work with every day where they come to me and say, well, I had a previous petition, and that's another topic we want to get to, but a previous petition, and I have this approval notice, but when we look at it, it's actually a receipt notice. Do you want to just, before we get to the RFEs, maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when actually the nurse will not get this. It's the employer that will get that. I mean, it's really who pays for it, but, in most of the cases, it's the employer who's paying for it. So they'll get a receipt for the fees on the I-140, and if they do premium processing, a receipt for that. And it will have a number on it so that you'll be able to track your case online and so on. But it's not an approval. When the I-140 is actually approved, at the top of the document, it will say Notice of Approval, and it will show your priority date, because we're going to get into that. There's not an indefinite, unlimited number of nurses who can immigrate to the U.S. They're limited according to category, which we can talk about, and according to the country of birth of the nurse. So for some countries, particularly India and China, nurses would have to wait years to immigrate to the U.S.
If it was a new petition.
If it was a new,
but if they had a previous petition prior to retrogression, then
well, we can definitely talk
so
about that.
There's so much to talk about.
So, but that's your place in line, and even as we're speaking now on it's July the 13th, 2018.
Today.
The August 2018 visa bulletin came out, and the visa bulletin shows the different countries and the different categories and lets you track, well, where am I in line? It's like you're going to a movie or something and you're standing in line.
I always use the analogy of the deli.
Okay, go.
You're standing
okay,
at the
deli.
You know, you go to American deli. I don't know if you have it in other countries. American deli, and you take a number,
right,
and then you wait to be served.
Right. So you know, the visa bulletin allows you to know which number they're calling at that time, and your number is on the notice of approval. It's the day that your employer. Well, I shouldn't even say that. Not the day that your employer filed the petition, the day the Immigration Service received the petition.
Okay.
That's your place in line. Most countries, the nurses are considered, it's a professional category, and because you need a college degree to be a registered nurse. So it's called the EB3, the employment-based third category. And if you look at the August visa bulletin, which you can see on our website at schusterman.com, it just went up a couple hours ago, you'll see that fortunately in the...
There was some good news.
Yeah, you know, in the EB3 category, there's no backlog for most countries, only 3, which is India, China, and Philippines. Those are the only countries. And the Philippines
and India moved, which was good.
Right. But India is still a huge backlog.
Yes.
The Philippines, which a couple of years ago was a 6 to 8 year backlog, is now between 18 and 24 months. So it's a lot better than before. So if you're a nurse from the Philippines, this would be an ideal time to get an employer and have the employer sponsor you for a green card.
And just to clarify, when you say you're a nurse from the Philippines, it's where you're born.
Exactly.
So, because we sometimes have nurses who maybe they were born in the Philippines and then maybe they've gone to work in the UK, for instance, or Canada, they're now a Canadian citizen or they're a UK citizen, and then they're saying, well, how does that figure into the visa bulletin?
Right, doesn't.
But it's based on the country where you're born, right?
Right. With you know, I mean, anytime you ask a lawyer a question, they're going to tell you, accept this or accept that.
Yes.
So,
except Australia, because I see we got a question from Australia.
Yeah.
But we're almost out of time and we're running out of, we've got so much to talk about. So,
but just something, and we have a video about this on our site. It's called cross-chargeability. So if a nurse from the Philippines would marry somebody not from the Philippines, but any other country except India or China, they wouldn't have any wait time. It would just be how fast government could process this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to sum up in terms of the visa bulletin, it's based on country of birth.
Yes.
At this stage, the only 3 countries that are backlogged are India, Philippines, and China.
Yes.
We've seen Philippines has progressed a lot in the last few months. India is progressing. It's still very backlogged, but there has been some progression.
True. That is true.
So, you know, time will tell how that evolves.
How are we doing?
We're almost out of time. And we haven't even got through the process. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot more that we wanted to cover. So the things that I was wanting to speak to you about was the request for further evidence, because we're seeing a lot of uptick of requests for further evidence, the notice of intent to deny, you call it annoyed?
Annoyed, yes. N-O-I-D.
N-O-I-D, annoyed. And I know there was a memo that came out today with another announcement.
Yes, now I haven't finished reading the memo because it just came out about an hour or 2 ago. But the Immigration Service in the last year or 2, they've been playing like a ping pong game with immigration lawyers and employers. So they'll be asking for many more, this request for evidence has gone up 40 to 50% over 2 years ago. So they're asking for papers, some of which are valid, some of which are just ridiculous requests, but it's the government and we need them to approve it, so we have to follow through with that. But they've created such a backlog with this that a new memo came out from the USCIS today, and it says in a lot of cases, and on the next video we can go through in more detail, but in a lot of cases, if it's not directly approvable, that petition, they won't even bother with a request for evidence or a notice of intent to deny. You'll just get a denial.
Wow.
Yeah. So something to look forward to.
It's an ever-evolving
yes.
picture. And that's really the purpose of these Facebook Live sessions because, as I've said before, I've been doing this for a long time. Carl's been doing it for a long time. And we really just wanted to share information. I see there was Larry said he's learning a lot, and thank you for Carl, you're so awesome and informative.
Oh, thank you.
We're glad that this is helpful, because that is really our passion, and our aim is to make sure to disseminate the correct information so that people know, there's a lot of misinformation and rumors, and it's a tumultuous time that we're living in, so we want to make sure that people get the right information. Right. I think we are out of time.
I want to mention, I didn't say anything about it, but my wife's from the Philippines, and I think we've done about a dozen of her nieces that we've brought to the U.S., and so sometimes I have an idea. I mean, I'm not slamming everybody. There's a lot of great lawyers out there, but there's some shady characters too, and I've seen some things in the application that just make me shake their heads and so on. So, we do have a video on our site about how to choose an immigration lawyer. And I think, I think you would spend a good 7 or 8 minutes watching it, right?
Do well to look at it, and you only have to listen to Carl's bio to know, the expertise and the knowledge that he and his firm have. And
we've been working with Tanya and Kinetics for 15 years or more,
Not quite, Carl. You're aging me, but
well, she started when she was a teenager. She doesn't want to admit that.
Well, no, not that long, but we've been doing this for a long time.
Okay.
So if anyone is interested in finding out about direct hire employers, please, the best way, I get asked this all the time, how do we get started? The best way to get started is to send us your resume, so that we can have a look at your background and see if you might be a fit in terms of either the green card or the TN process. And also from our side, check out our website, check out our Facebook reviews, and you can see the kind of reviews that we get and how we have looked after our nurses over the years. Also, just to share with everybody that we have launched an IELTS support group. We have done this with a partner who is originally from the UK. We've been extremely happy with the results that we're getting. I know that people, you can't do this process and come to the US without the IELTS if you have not been trained in English. So it's a really big barrier of entry. It's a free support group. Anybody who is an RN is welcome to join. We have pointers and tips that are posted in the group. There are free lesson plans for the nurses. We can put you together with a study partner. So there's a lot of very exciting things that we really are trying to go the extra mile for our nurses. And anyone who's an RN is welcome to join. You can have a look on Facebook and find the Kinetics IELTS support group. The partner that we've chosen, just to tell you a little bit about them, they are an IELTS, they are from the UK. So the criteria in the UK is actually higher. They've got a higher requirement for the IELTS. And they are actually ex-IELTS examiners.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that's where they've had a lot of success in the UK, and obviously, that means that they'll have a lot of success here. So we're very excited about that. So thank you so much for your time. We will be doing further Facebook Live sessions. We didn't actually even we're kind of halfway through the consular process. So we will be doing another session next week. We had a short break because of vacation time. But we will be back next week doing another Facebook Live session. And I think what we'll do is we'll carry on with the consular process. And maybe then next week we'll also start talking about the adjustment of status process and make sure everybody's up to speed in those areas.
So, tell your friends. And, we're really happy. We think that, informed clients are the best clients. You don't get stuck in any of these immigration delays and things like that. So tell your friends, and we have been uploading these Facebook Live sessions onto our YouTube channel also, which just somehow passed 2 million views last week.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm on 7-Eleven. We hit that.
7-Eleven.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll see you next week.
Okay, so thank you everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.